Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'll be running through my usual thoughts about today's Prime Minister's questions, as Liz Truss was, as expected, made to look utterly bereft of credibility. But she also gave the impression of not wanting to go down without a fight, as she contradicted her new Chancellor with him sat right beside her. The power games are still on. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So we don't really need to say very much about the humiliating experience that this would have been for Truss, or the uncomfortable spectacle for many Tory MPs. Liz Truss has had her entire government agenda torn up in the most spectacular, public and brutal fashion. Even an accomplished debater would have been able to do very little against opposition MPs today, and Truss is an extremely poor quality debater. It was a right mess. But before PMQs, I'd suggested that Keir Starmer should make his first question, Mr. Speaker, I see from yesterday's polling that were there to be a general election tomorrow, the Conservative Party would return only one MP. Does the Prime Minister think it would be her? Now, the Tories aren't actually going to be obliterated that badly in a general election, but the point of the question would be to begin with humiliation. Starmer didn't actually use that. He didn't take my suggestion, but his own opening question did the same job. What he said is he noted that there's a book being written about Truss's time in office. It'll be out by Christmas, he said. Was this the release date or the title, he asked. Got a lot of laughs, as you'd expect, and that was the point. It was a facetious question, of course. It's one that neither demanded nor expected an answer, but Starmer knew he wasn't going to get answers to his serious questions anyway, because the government are screwed and Truss personally finished. Just a matter of a few weeks ago, after Truss's first PMQs, I said at the time, do you know what? I said, in praise of her, I said it's like a return to more normal politics. Starmer and other opposition MPs asked their questions and Truss responded to them. Obviously, she didn't give full and frank answers. That's not how politics works. But she was at least responding to the questions asked of her. Mind you, that was before she actually did anything. But it almost looks like we might get old-fashioned Prime Minister's questions again, where the opposition try and hold the government to account, the government try and defend itself. You know, 6 weeks later, in Truss's only third PMQs, it's all gone. Truss is unable to answer questions directly because there is no good answer. None at all. There's no safe ground for her to retreat to either. Because that's another thing. If the opposition will try and probe you on the ground on which you're weak, you try and shift it. The Prime Minister tries to shift it onto their stronger ground. She has no strong ground. She actually did answer one question. She answered one of Ian Blackford's questions. Actually, both of them. He seemed to ask the same thing twice. But he asked about the news that the government was no longer committed to the triple lock guarantee for pensions. Now, the new Chancellor had suggested this. It was reported in the Tory newspapers this morning. And James Cleverly, Truss's Foreign Secretary, refused to confirm that the triple lock was still guaranteed, which is as good as saying it's not at all guaranteed. Either it's guaranteed or it's not. Not being guaranteed doesn't mean to say the triple lock will go away. So not answering it at all doesn't mean it's definitely going away. But you could say, oh, no, it's a total commitment. But he couldn't. He couldn't say that. And that was this morning. So Blackford was asking about this. And Truss said she didn't know what he was talking about. It's like, well, it was on the front page of the Tory press. You do know what it's talking about. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. She said that both she and the Chancellor were committed to the triple lock on pensions. It's a manifesto commitment, blah, 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 blah. Now, do be wary of her commitments, because just last week in PMQs, she committed to no public spending cuts. Yeah. But there she was, committing to the triple lock on pensions. Now, I couldn't see Jeremy Hunt's face because she was obscuring him at the time. I don't know whether he gave a double take or anything. But commitment to the triple lock on pensions, which only yesterday, the government were refusing to confirm. Only this morning, her Foreign Secretary refused to confirm was a commitment. And he was sat there. I saw him. He was sat there, as she said it, nodding along. Now, I'm just speculating here, but I wonder if Truss is just saying what is easy for her because she knows her time is limited now. I gather that Brady has informed her that the number of letters normally required to trigger a confidence vote has now been exceeded. But he's not going to do anything because normally you get 12 months. A new leader has 12 months before a confidence vote can be issued. Obviously, they can change the rules, but Brady, according to reports, Brady has suggested he's not going to do that unless the number of letters is much higher. I hear maybe half of Tory MPs. So arguably what Truss has done here is carry out a bit of sabotage on the coup against her leadership. The triple lock is probably not actually safe. She knows that whoever forced Hunt onto her is going to remove it. She's just kicking back by saying that it's a commitment so that when it's not, she'll claim it was the rebels, not her, that were breaking these promises. But getting back to that first question of Starmer's and the situation for Labour is now as it was in the final protracted months of Boris Johnson's fall. Little to be gained from attacking the Prime Minister because it's clear he would not be there at the next election. The same is now true of Liz Truss. She's not going to be there at the next election. So Labour need to attack her government, but they know that her government is going to be replaced before the all-important general election. They just don't know when. But I'd be mightily surprised if the Tories leave it until the local elections next spring. Otherwise, it'll be a bloodbath. Probably will be anyway. His other questions were a roll call of the collapse of her agenda. At one point, he literally reeled them off in a sort of audience participation event. He called out her policies one by one and said, gone, gone, gone. And as he did so, his own backbenchers joined in. It was quite a spectacle. I mean, you're used to hearing MPs loudly cheering on their leader and braying at their opponents. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're supporting them. Sometimes they're just doing it to try and boost them up. Even they'll do it just as they're about to push their own leader into the brink. But, you know, and it's childish. But it's how our parliament, which, let's face it, is largely full of privately educated boys who never grew up, behaves. But this was different. This was remarkable. It was, like I say, it's the sort of thing you see performers on the stage doing to bring the audience in. I don't think I can remember seeing anything quite like it. Have a watch.
The country's got nothing to show for it except the destruction of the economy and the implosion of the Tory party. I've got the list here. 45p tax cut, gone. Corporation tax cut, gone. 20p tax cut, gone. 2-year energy freeze, gone. Tax-free shopping, gone. Economic credibility, gone. And her supposed best friend, the former Chancellor, he's gone as well. They're all gone. So why is she still here?
Now, whereas Tory MPs were trying their best to shout and bray, it was just mechanical. You know, they were being blown away and they knew it. They know there's no way back from this for Truss. No way at all. Each of them is just hoping they personally can survive the harvester at the next election. At one point, after Truss tried asking Starmer questions again, like she did last week, like Boris Johnson used to do, he replied to her, I know why she's asking me questions. It's because she is an opposition in waiting and she knows Labour is a government in waiting. Truss had nothing. There was no trick, no deflection that wasn't an open goal for Starmer when he stood back up. At the end, she said she was a fighter, not a quitter, when he told her why she's still here again. You know, I'm a fighter, not a quitter. This was a quote by a former Labour minister from Labour's last government, Peter Mandelson. Truss is even quoting Labour politicians to try and defend her now. Absolute shambles. And after Starmer's humiliation and Blackford's trapping her into contradicting her new Chancellor, which is going to cause a little bit of aggro within the Tory party, the backbench MP's questions weren't too bad for her, actually. Obviously, opposition MPs kept the pressure up, but her own backbenchers, I think, were mostly still kind. There were some awkward questions for on policy. There was one on foreign aid, very notable about fracking, because that's a big flashpoint today. I may have to talk about the implications of that tomorrow, but I'll wait for the vote first. But I think Labour win on that one either way with this vote. But by and large, her MPs hadn't fully turned on her. You know, we know that some have publicly called for her to step down, but nobody stood up and actually called on her to do so in the Commons. You know, they did do that with Boris Johnson at the end. So it doesn't seem like they're quite ready for her to resign just yet. They want to make sure the vacuum can be filled when it is time for her to go into the palace. Oddly enough, Sajid Javid was on the order paper to ask a question. He was there second. I thought, well, that'll be interesting. That'll be really interesting, because Truss called him shit. She said he was a shit minister. But for whatever reason, he didn't actually answer the question. I don't even know if he was in the chamber, but he didn't ask the question. I did check a couple of times, you know, through the footage. Not sure what that was about. But it did go largely as expect. Truss didn't or her at any point, actually. That's an improvement. But I suppose that's relatively easy when you're not even attempting to answer the question. She had her pre-planned statement to make, and she just made them. But we're now back into that tiresome phase of the end of days for the Prime Minister. Labour aren't gaining much by attacking Truss personally, because she is their best asset. The longer she remains in place, the longer Labour stay well ahead in the polls, the harder it'll be for the Tories to turn it around in time. But they do need to still keep the pressure on the government in order to keep reminding people just what a shambles the country's in right now. Frankly, I don't see why Starmer shouldn't adopt the same pattern of questions from now on, at least as long as Truss remains PM. Begin with some ritual humiliation, then point out the chaos in government positions, point out dissension within the Tory ranks if possible, maybe bring some polling into it, bring in some more audience participation to unite the Labour benches if you can, then finish it off with a thorough tearing down of the Tories' time in office. Just do that each week. Job done. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.